Welcome back to my channel where power, money, and politics meet in a court of law. Join me today as we are about to hear an incredible story where an HOA towed his truck because they didn't know he was the judge who approved their charter. You won't believe what happens next. Robert lived in a neighborhood that had a homeowners association. The association was formed to ensure all residents abided by the rules and regulations set out in the CC and RS. If any resident broke these rules, the HOA would take them to court. Although this was rare, the HOA had no lawyers on retainer. When Robert moved in, he signed documents acknowledging he had read and understood the CC and RS. And one of the rules stipulated that if your vehicle was left in your driveway for more than 24 hours, the HOA was authorized to tow it at the owner's expense. At the time, Robert owned a pickup truck, but he kept it parked in the garage. However, recently, he had begun doing work around the house and left the truck in the driveway overnight several times. Each time he did this, he received a warning from the HOA, but he just ignored them. Then one day he came home to find the truck gone and ended up at the local impound lot. After paying the fees to get his truck back, he demanded to know why the truck was towed. He argued he had never been given proper notice before. And anyway, how could they prove that it had been there for 24 hours? In response, the president of the HOA told him that they had been watching his property and they were sure the truck had been there long enough. They had even taken photos, so they were not intimidated by Robert's angry tirade. Robert calmed down and asked for a copy of the photographs. The HOA refused, citing that he wasn't a member of the board and it wasn't relevant to him. Robert got upset again and stormed off. Later that week, he received a letter from the HOA detailing the incident and informing him that he now owed them the cost of towing. The letter also informed him that if he did not pay the amount detailed in the letter within 30 days, the HOA would take him to court. On the day in question, Robert took the letter to his boss, who just so happened to be a lawyer. Robert's boss read over the letter and couldn't believe what he was reading. He immediately asked Robert if he was serious about paying the amount requested. When Robert said yes, his boss laughed and explained that there was no way the HOA could do this. He said the photos they took were inadmissible because they were obtained through surveillance. Furthermore, if they had actually watched the property, that was trespassing. There was no way a court would uphold such a decision. Finally, he pointed out that the letter threatened legal action without giving Robert a chance to respond or make payment arrangements. This is harassment. Robert's boss then called his friend, who was a judge, and asked him if he knew what to do. The judge suggested filing a small claims lawsuit against the HOA for the amount they were demanding, plus an extra amount for the stress they put him through. Robert decided to go for it. After getting all the documentation in order, Robert went to see the judge. The judge reviewed the information, and everything seemed to be in order. It was then that the judge noticed that Robert was a familiar face. He knew him from another case that was ongoing. Robert had been in a dispute with his neighbor over the height of a fence. Robert had come to the judge in that matter, and the judge ruled in his favor. As soon as the judge realized who Robert was, he excused himself from the case. The judge felt that having a personal relationship with Robert would cause people to question his impartiality. He wanted to avoid any perception of impropriety. Not long after that, Robert met with another judge to hear his case. Once the judge heard all the facts, he agreed with the previous judge that the evidence presented by the HOA was invalid. He also agreed that threatening legal action when the HOA could have easily obtained payment constituted harassment. Therefore, he sided with Robert. However, he also recognized that the HOA had acted in good faith, believing that the process they followed was correct. The judge felt that it would be unfair for Robert to receive compensation for the emotional distress he claimed to have suffered. He awarded Robert the amount of money he had paid to get his truck out of the impound lot. He also ordered that the HOA pay Robert's court costs. Although Robert was not awarded the amount of money he had hoped for, he was pleased with the outcome. The judge's decision caused quite a stir in the community. Most people agreed with the decision, feeling that the HOA had acted inappropriately. Others, however, thought that the judge had been biased, because he had a prior relationship with Robert. The HOA board members were devastated. They had done everything they could to protect their community and its residents, and now they were being punished for it. They knew that the judge had made the right decision, but they still couldn't help but feel bitter about it. In the end, the judge's decision stood, and the HOA had to pay out of their reserve fund to cover the costs. The situation could have been avoided if the HOA had simply done their research and made sure that they were following the proper procedures. But their failure to do so had cost them dearly. One day, Robert was going through some paperwork when he realized something. The documents gave him the authority to appoint board members to the HOA. As he looked over the list of current board members, he couldn't help but smile. He knew exactly who he wanted to replace them with. He began by calling up a close friend of his who was also an attorney. He explained the situation to him and asked if he would be interested in joining the board. The attorney was surprised by the request, but he eventually agreed. Robert then reached out to a few other friends and acquaintances, and they also agreed to join the board. Once Robert had appointed his new board members, he wasted no time in getting to work. He began by reviewing the HOA's finances, and he was shocked by what he found. The HOA was virtually penniless, due to the payouts from the lawsuits. Robert knew that things had to change if the HOA was going to survive. He began by cutting costs wherever he could, and he also began raising funds through new membership drives. The residents were happy with the changes that Robert was making, and they began to trust him. One day, Robert was meeting with the board when a new proposal came across his desk. It was a proposal to hire a lawyer to review all of the HOA's documents and make sure that they were up to date. Robert knew that this was a good idea, but he was hesitant to approve it. He didn't want to spend the HOA's money on something that wasn't necessary. Just then, one of the board members spoke up. He explained that having a lawyer review the documents would prevent the HOA from making costly mistakes in the future. He also explained that the lawyer could help the HOA draft new rules and regulations that would protect the residents and the property values. Robert knew that the board member was right. He approved the proposal, and the HOA hired a lawyer. In the meantime, Robert had been working hard to improve the neighborhood. He had organized a cleanup day, and he had also worked with the city to improve the parks and playgrounds. The residents were starting to see the changes that Robert was making, and they were excited about the future of the neighborhood. One day, Robert was walking through the neighborhood when he saw a group of residents gathered together. He stopped to talk to them, and they told him that they were discussing the future of the neighborhood. They said that they were worried about the state of the property, and they were also concerned about the lack of communication from the HOA. Robert listened to their concerns, and he shared his vision for the neighborhood. He told them that he wanted to work with them to make the neighborhood a better place to live. The residents were encouraged by Robert's words and they agreed to work with him. From that day forward, Robert worked closely with the residents to improve the neighborhood. He organized regular meetings and he made sure that the residents were informed about all of the HOA's activities. The residents appreciated Robert's efforts and they began to trust him. It wasn't long before the neighborhood was thriving again. The properties were well maintained and the residents were proud to call it home. Robert had succeeded in turning the neighborhood around, and he had done it without spending a single dollar from the HOA's reserve fund. Robert was walking through the neighborhood when he came across a group of residents who were gathered around a barbecue. They invited him to join them and they thanked him for all that he had done for the neighborhood. Robert was honored by their gratitude and he knew that he had made the right decision when he had taken over the HOA today. Robert still lives in the neighborhood and he is still active in the HOA. He has no regrets about what he did, and he is proud of the community that he has helped to create. Thank you for watching this episode. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. Please don't forget to share it with others if you think it might help them.